Hello, I'm Michael. This is
Eduardo.
and we're doing the 1980s. One is, what are some famous quotes that describe the 80s? I think one of them was definitely, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. That, I think that describes the 80s because a lot of important stuff happened, like Chernobyl and Ronald Reagan was elected. And that was from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which was a really good movie. I suggest it. Another quote is, "I grew up in the '80s. I was a kid, but all my favorite movies came from that period." That was from Dan Fogler, and I think that like describes the '80s a lot because a lot of good movies came from the '80s. Another question we get asked a lot is, who were prominent designers slash labels in the '80s? I think Calvin Klein, because he popularized worked jeans for men and women around the world, which those are important if you work in like a factory or outside with like electrical stuff and yard work. And Ralph Lauren helped set off his business Polo with the sort of preppy vintage looks. And I'm be careful saying this. Thierry Mugler helped transform ordinary women and superstars and otherworldly figures using PVC and a penchant for showmanship. Air Jordan slash Nike, that's another one because it was the first piece of clothing that was considered as a status symbol. So like if you're, I guess if you're,
If you were wearing anything that was a collab from Air Jordan or Nike, it made you like look like you were like an athlete, which everybody pretty much loved, including the shoes too. The shoes were like a big part of the fashion industry. Celebrities popularized these dominant trends. So Prince, he was the Minneapolis-born musician, was known to be fearlessly fluid in his style of fashion. He wore well, how do I say this? He was fearless in gender fluidity. He wore high heels, lace gloves, sequins, tassels, feathers, lyrics, and military-inspired tailoring. And it's said that his style can be comparable to David Bowie's, who also had a similar taste in fashion. And next is the king of pop, Michael Jackson, who left a mark on both the music and fashion industry before his passing in the late of June 2009. From military-style jackets, skinny silhouettes, shoulder pads, and excessive zippers, to sparkly clothes and gloves, he defined himself as a fashion pioneer that has heavily influenced the world of fashion even today.
Well said. Well said.
And Madonna, she's been a fashion leader since before she became famous in the 1980s. She popularized navel-bearing miniskirts, comb bras, and Gap jeans, and she used her fame to help popularize these things, and yet she was still making money at the same time. The question is, what was the prominent silhouette outline? Silhouette back in the 80s, it went in more like a boxy to the shoulder line direction with like a generally slim silhouette, like around the waist and hip. So that was pretty much what everybody was rocking back in the day. Clothing similarities to other time periods can be recognized in the style trends. The similarities can be drawn between the late 60s and the early 70s with the bright colors, like the neon colors in the 80s, and the shoulder pads along with the military styles, which I think military style fashion wasn't really a thing until like during the 1940s, during World War II.
Another question is, what textiles, fabrics, and other things were used? And I think velour, and it can be woven or knitted fabric that can stretch, which is important because in the 80s, they're crazy fashion, all stretchy and stuff. And spandex. It was meant to replace latex rubber used in the making of girdles and bras. Major events occurred. Chernobyl, it's one of the worst nuclear events or not nuclear,
nuclear meltdown.
Yeah.
Plant meltdown, which was probably the worst that mankind has ever seen, and
Like,
we grew wary of the use of nuclear energy, so we kind of shied away from using nuclear energy as a energy source.
Also, Ronald Reagan was elected president, and this was important because he was just a really
good guy. And his wife
guy.
impacted the fashion industry a little bit too.
And thanks for watching.